For the week. Just a couple of observations. I had some quiet conversations, Jay, with you and a few other folks a little bit, but a couple of things that are pretty clear for this week. First, the number of 225 is pretty much irrelevant today. This race is clearly not decided. There's no question that there are numbers of individuals who were validly registered, who voted, and according to the witness of the testimony of a number of witnesses, their votes should be counted. And I fully anticipate that they will. Can't tell you how many, can't tell you, but there's just no question that the number 225 is an artificial number. The Franken campaign has talked about limiting us to 654 votes. They've got their own votes, but there's no question that this race is not over. And that's very, very clear from what we've seen today and the rest of the week. Just a little personal aside, a reflection on a witness yesterday. And it was the young college kid who drove all the way from Fargo, who applied by computer. For those of us who have kids in college and watched that young man up there, who really wanted his vote to matter, and used the computer to do it, I was kind of taken aback. I say this sort of tongue-in-cheek. I don't know if Mr. Hamilton, the Franken lawyers, have kids in college, cross-examining about why didn't you make a copy? Why didn't you write it, do it with a pen? The world of these young people is a world of computers. More and more folks are going to be doing that. That's the next generation. And there's no question that we have to be looking at the whole use of technology to accommodate people who are going to vote that way. In the future, I don't think you're going to be able to use the signature on an application to verify the signature on a ballot, since that signature on an application is more and more going to come by computer, come by PDF. And so, if I am fortunate enough to get back in the U.S. Senate, I can tell you I'm going to spend some time looking at how do we expand how do we greater enfranchise young people who are going to be using technology to vote. Clearly, in his case, he suffered a price. Now, hopefully, that suffering will be rectified and his vote will be counted. But it's very clear that this issue of how do you verify signatures is something that we have to look at in a changing world technology. I make it personal. I filled out my FAFSA form, and for those of us who have kids in college, they know your FAFSA form is the application for the form you fill out to determine loans and aid. You sign that with a PIN number. That's a secure number. Security is very, very important. You don't sign out a written signature. And so, that's a small issue here, but I think an important one as we look to the future. But the bottom line is that this race clearly is far from over, that there are going to be numbers of additional votes going to be counted. I don't know who the folks are in the universe of votes that we want counted. I don't know who they voted for, but their votes are out there, and they're valid votes, and they were registered, and they have a right for their vote to be heard, to be counted, and not cast aside by some technicality or some lawyer's pleading. So I thought this was a great week today for democracy and a great week for Minnesota. And I would hope in the end campaigns could come together and say, something, we should do everything we can to count every valid vote.
You said you don't know who they voted for, but all of the voters that you brought to the stand did vote for you. They were contacted by the Republican Party.
Right. What happened in this process, and I'll step back, obviously the Franken campaign got on the absentee voters quicker. They actually put out videos and asked voters how they voted. We have a campaign came back. I don't know if the question was how'd you vote. I think the question may have been, or would you step forward and sign an affidavit? Would you prepared to come forward on behalf of Senator Coleman? I don't know if there was a question of how did you vote. But there's a whole universe of folks out there that we don't know, that haven't been contacted. That's a very small universe that has been contacted. I think it was important for them to come in. I think it was great to come in. And by the way, Franken will have a chance. He's going to bring voters in to his campaign. And I think that's a good thing, because they will make the same case that there are validly, there's no question, if you listen to both Mr. Mansky, he said we've got votes in Ramsey County that we believe contain applications, so the registered voters. We have votes that we believe should be counted that haven't been counted. I have to believe that before this process is over, a lot more votes are going to be counted.
Does Mr. Demuth's problem with his computer and all that stuff, does that make you more supportive of early voting in person?
It makes me reflect the reality of where this next generation is going. and that is we're going to use technology. I keep going back to my 22-year-old isn't going to come early to vote. He's going to get online. He's going to use a PDF form. By the way, every one of these forms are PDFs. And so it's not about, again, having kids, I'm not going to change the way he does a lot of things. But I think we as policymakers, those of us who have been policymakers, need to reflect on the reality of more use of technology, and that people should not be disenfranchised because they can't sign an application form with a computer mouse.
Senator, what's the difference between looking at the 62 votes in Ramsey County that Mr. Mansky said were available, and then your request that look at all 11,000?
Well, the only difference is that there was a list that was prepared first before ballots were opened, Eric, and that's the key here. The consistency of the Coleman position is that, one, from the very beginning we said these matters need to be dealt with in a contested case after the canvassing board process. When 950 some odd ballots were opened, it was clear that ballots were opened that didn't have witness addresses, that had stamps that were or labels that obscured parts of a ballot. And what we did is we went back and looked at the broader universe of votes in other counties that matched the reason for ejection of those that are open, and said equal protection requires that you count all votes equally. That if they did it one way in Ramsey County, and obviously I got to tell you, one of the other things that came out of this week is that we have some outstanding public servants. Joe Mansky, I said I should get CLE credit for listening to Mansky, the tutorial that he gave. Jim Gelman's a really good public servant. But the reality is there were different standards used by counties. That was a concern we had. And so the universe gets greatly expanded. And what we're trying to do in our case is to look at those ballots that have been opened, look at the categories that they're in, and then look at other ballots statewide that meet those categories. And so we believe there's a much larger universe out there, but that universe only came into play after the 950 some odd ballots were opened.
So in the larger universe, if there's a significant signature mismatch, short of them coming in like Mr. Booth and telling us, oh no, it's me signing at all times, how are we going to know it was that?
Well, I think the judges are going to have to make some determination. What you got from Mansky, at least what I got, and again, the judges are going to make the final decision. I think they're looking at a presumption that folks are doing the right thing. They're going to have to take a look at that and make that determination. I can just say this, and I want to get back to the young man, the Demuth, which really it's impossible in that situation to use the comparative signatures to verify that the signature on the ballot, on the actual ballot envelope compares to the earlier one, because there isn't an earlier one. We're going to have to figure out some ways to deal with the issue of security. Tougher, maybe, I don't know if there are tougher penalties for if you violate election laws, I don't know. But at the same time, we have to be cognizant that the way in which we've done the comparisons simply, unfortunately, disenfranchises valid voters. We saw the situation with Mr. Anderson where the signature wasn't in the right place. We've had discussion about folks who may have some physical changes and disability. We have to come up with a better way of verifying that the voter is in fact the voter. And one of the things that may come out of this process is that we have to look beyond comparisons of signatures on an application versus signature on the ballot form itself.
How ironic is it that you wouldn't even know who Mr. Demuth is if Franken hadn't gone to court and sued to get the names of these voters?
All right, listen, there's a lot of irony here in this process. But the bottom line is that I think this is good for democracy. I think this state is going to kind of move forward in terms of dealing with issues like absentee ballots by this experience that I hope put us at the forefront of greater enfranchisement along with adequate security. I think that's the opportunity that's going to come out of this. Clearly, if you heard Mansky today, there was, a 30% increase in absentee ballots in Ramsey County in the last election. The world is not about, I'm not going to get my kid to show up a day early. I can tell you that, John. It's not going to happen. 2 days? But I have no doubt that if he can use that computer to do what he does, that's his world, it's our kids' world, it's the future world, and we have to figure out a better way to accommodate. Last question? If
Mr.
not,
Mansky said that Demuth's vote and Anderson's vote and the voter his application, all of those were good rejections. So you're fighting against the person that you brought on the stand.
I think Mr. Mansky said that Anderson's vote should count.
He said yesterday
Absolutely.
that it shouldn't.
No, he said today he counted. He said I'd count that vote. Absolutely. He said I would count that vote. He did not say that those were good rejections. I think across the board, he talked about these. He identified a number of votes that should be counted. In particular, he said that was a mistake. What he did say was that his folks had only 15 seconds to look at the Anderson application, and in that 15 seconds, they didn't see the signature where it should be. But he said if you had more time and you would find it, that it would be that there's no question that that vote should be counted. That's the beauty, I'll end on this note, of this proceeding. It's one of the reasons we said let's deal with absentee ballots in a contested case rather than in a canvassing board process where we were worried about varying applications, varying standards. But Mansky testified very clearly today that if he had the time, if they would have had more time to look at that ballot, Mr. Anderson's vote would have been accepted, and there was no question that Mr. Anderson's vote today should be counted. And there are many other votes that today should be counted, and I anticipate that they will be. Thank you.
What do you make of Mr. Franken taking a vacation when this plays out?
It's his choice. Thank you.